Good evening, or good morning, or good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to the International Great Black Read Aloud, day 2024. And it is day 26, Paranormal Day. And we apologize, we have been busily doing other book things. And we anticipated that we would have streamed the past few days, but we did not. So we will air those along with the other ones we need to air here shortly. Well, my name is LD Robinson, and I am your reading host for the evening. As I said, today is Paranormal Day here at the International Great Black Read Aloud Day, and we are excited to be here with you. I'm going to remind you of a few things, as we always do. We want to invite you to subscribe to our website, greatblackreadaloudday.org. It is where you can get all the information about the things that we will be doing throughout the year, but also you can get our reading list. So we post the covers from our selections, and we're making an effort this year to advise everyone, just to inform everyone where our authors originate. And so we are excited about today. Well, um, you can follow us online at Black Read Aloud, and we read aloud for educational purposes to help bring awareness to all the various types of literature that is produced and written by Black people all around the world. And that is what we are on a mission to do. And we are giving voice to words written by Black people all around the world. Well, it is Paranormal Day. We are reading a little late, but perhaps that is a little fitting for our genre today. Well, we told you before that we were going to be at Fresh Book Festivals, and we want to let you know that the Fresh Book Festival 2024, actually the new International Fresh Book Festival, was a hit. The film festival was fantastic with filmmaker Santanish Myers, and our book festival was a hit with so many different authors from different genres available to the public. And so it was a huge, diverse turnout of books. And so we want to invite you that to go ahead and subscribe to freshbookfestivals.net so that you don't miss the next Fresh Book Festival, which will be in 2025. Okay, it is Paranormal Day. And paranormal means that it's beyond what is normal. And so we have something that is just that. It fits the bill. And I was torn between two selections, and I thought one perhaps was a bit much. So in terms of what occurred early on in the story, and it only gets a little more interesting after that. And so it is the same thing with this one, except in a little different way. And so our selection today takes place in the future. So it is a bit of a paranormal fantasy, and it takes place in the 2080s. And we are ready to put up our title. And our title is Nubia, The Awakening by Mr. Omar Epps and Mr. Clarence Haynes. Again, it is Paranormal Day, and we're going to put up our cover so that you can see it. It's a beautiful cover. And here it is. It's Nubia, The Awakening by Omar Epps. Yes, Omar Epps, the actor and producer, and Clarence Haynes, A. Haynes. All right. Well, we are back and got our title up, and we're going to read. And we're going to read from our prologue and part of chapter 1 because it really sets the tone for the rest of the book. And I think that if you are interested in reading this, this will certainly wet your whistle for this tale. Okay. Prologue. This is Nubia, the Awakening. The streets of lower Manhattan were slick with rain, puddles glowing with light from the hologram news flashing across the buildings. The words flood warning shone in red, continuously scrolling beneath the news reports. Those below in the swamp kept their doors shut tight in response, or as tight as they could given the crumbling brick and mortar that made up their apartments. They, of course, were the lucky ones. Most of the inhabitants lived in archaic wooden shanties with aluminum roofs, sequestered in what had once been the financial district of New York City before the gleaming skyscrapers were demolished. But whether the people were in apartments or shanties, each storm battered their homes even further, threatening to sweep them all away the next time the clouds darkened and the thunder roared. Each drop of rain spelled potential doom. Still, those living below were strong. They built and rebuilt, using whatever materials they could to fortify their homes. They leaned on one another, holding tight to the community they'd carried across the sea. It wouldn't be the first time Nubians experienced a flood. On this rainy night, a figure in a long coat slogged through the wet. They pulled their hood tighter against the chill in the air. The figure's eyes moved to a holo ad, which is a hologram ad, watching the words blossom across the night sky amid the downpour. Don't you want to ascend up high? Up high, the glorious promise of the sky city. The figure pivoted, taking in the terrain as far as they could. To the north stood the faint outlines of the sleek Central Park towers that ferried citizens to the heavens. In contrast, the south offered up a jagged brown seawall, one of several that loomed over the lower portions of New York. The figure tilted their head back, gazing up at the promise itself. Above them, the sky and the city loomed large, glittering and bright, buoyed by its anti gravity technology. Up there, the rain pattered gently on windows and roofs, never finding an open crack, never slipping through to aggravate the residents nestled inside. Up high, a person wanted for nothing. Up high, rain was a steady melody to fall asleep to and not the stuff of nightmares. Footsteps made the figure turn. They ducked closer to the nearest building, letting shadows swallow them whole. They watched for someone to appear, looking left and right as only one who knows they're being followed does. They waited, their breath white in the cold air. The night was quiet, save for the rain. It beat steadily. Soon it might stop completely, only to be replaced by an intense heat that would burn skin and take one's breath away. There was no telling with the weather, not anymore. But for now, the rain hid the sound of the footsteps as they started again. The figure, still pressed against the wall, found themselves pulled back to the words of the hollow ad. Find yourself in the sky. Find yourself up high. The figure hugged themselves against the chill. They took a step forward, letting the light of the hollow warm their face with its radiance, their arms falling to their sides. For a brief moment, they forgot about the rain. They didn't see the person behind them until it was too late. Chapter 1. Zubiri. And I must stop and mention that this story is about three Nubians um, who find themselves in a new land. And so this is a take from one of those three. Each punch brought Zaviri a bit closer to peace. I'm sorry. Each punch brought Zabiri a bit closer to peace. The bag she was working was ancient, pilling in places with lopsided stuffing that left her knuckles smarting after the beating. She was going to need to do some rehab on it soon, otherwise, she'd just be punching leather. Zubiri stepped back from the bag, taking a breath in the cool morning air. She rubbed absently at the silver scar on her chin, tossing her locked hair away from her face as she forced herself to slow her breathing. Zubiri knew that part of mastering the fighting forms was mastering the breath. It couldn't be all punching and kicking. Ever since her father had started to train her in Nubian fighting forms, he'd stressed the importance of mindfulness, of honing one's thoughts before landing each blow. Her father had drilled this philosophy into her brain ever since she was small, when it was her tiny fist connecting with his palm in their living room. Now Zabiri had more than outgrown training in that living room, mostly because it doubled as her bedroom. So she'd gotten creative, something she'd never had a problem with. Sometimes she'd train in an empty warehouse. Other times she'd train in the scraggly huts and scrapyards with their open access to the river. At school, there was the gym, which she used on occasion, but she preferred places in nature. One of the reasons she made the trek so early to Minerva Park. Nature, with its serenity and stillness, made it easier for her to find an organic connection between the human body and the outer world, an intention deeply embedded in the Nubian forms. Given that the city was mostly devoid of nature, though, she had to rely on the small offerings of trees and shrubs found in Minerva. There, Zubiri had her special hidden places where she could practice, like her little patch off to the side of the abandoned playground where there was a sturdy enough tree to hang the trusty punching bag she bought cheap from one of her neighbors. She had to admit it felt good to get out of the swamp as much as she loved her hood. The Nubian Quarter wasn't an actual swamp, of course, but that was what everyone had called it for as long as Zubiri could remember. She'd asked her father once why the quarter had been blessed with such a nickname, and he just shaken his head. He knew that when Zubiri asked a question, no matter how innocent it seemed, she usually had about five others in reserve. The swamp was where most Nubian refugees lived, a last resort after they'd fled their homeland and arrived in New York back in the early 2080s. Nubians couldn't find even the most menial jobs and were shut out of the renters market by landlords, so they had no choice but to lease cheap plots of land held by the government in the city's abandoned financial district, which had since moved up high. They'd been expected to fail, or so Zubiri's father told her. It had been through sheer Nubian will and a sense of community that they managed to build and maintain their homes there, humble as they might be. Nubian will was behind most of the things Nubians had. Zubiri had seen it all her life. Her own father's determination to pass down the fighting forms was a testament to that, too, how he made sure not only she learned all of them, but could enact each of them in her sleep. She turned back to the bag, shifting her weight as she landed more blows before switching to high kicks. She crouched low, her legs shaking from the exertion. She must have already been out of the park for at least an hour, and she was feeling it everywhere. Didn't matter. Pain was part of the process, and she welcomed it with open arms. Punching and kicking and maneuvering around the bag every day helped Zubiri deal with whatever she needed to deal with before she could be a regular person, as Brianna liked to put it. On the next punch, she connected with the sharp corner of the bag. Bright pain zinged up her arm and she stepped back. It was then that she heard a voice, a whisper. Zubiri's head whipped around as she sought the source. She didn't expect to be in the park alone. Many people used it for recreation and in some cases a home. But this early, it was usually quiet. Zubiri excuse me, swiped at her brow before catching sight of something stirring in the bush across from her. Someone there, she called out, flexing her fingers. More staring. Zabiri swore she heard a sort of gasping sound, followed by a cough. She bit her lip. It was impossible not to hear her dad's voice in her head, telling her that this could be a trap and to run away now. As the head of his own security company, he knew every trick and scam in the book. The city was rife with desperate people, and desperation made people dangerous. But Zabiri also knew that if some mugger was hiding in the brush, they'd pick the wrong girl. She took a few tentative steps toward the brush. As she got closer, a cool April breeze kicked up, making her shiver. She blinked at the dust stirred up around her, then opened her eyes again. There. At first, Zabiri didn't know what she was seeing. It was like a wisp of air, something both completely there and not, like a spark of electricity zipping over an exposed wire. Here and gone again, more than a shadow, but not by much. A wisp of her figure, barely discernible in the haze of morning. She blinked again, thinking the morning's exertion was getting to her. And that was when the wisp sharpened. A woman appeared, with long braids over her shoulders and eyes that glowed in the beams of sunlight that fell through the branches of the trees. Her gaze settled on Zabiri, piercing, unforgiving. She wore long robes, her arms crossed. Zabiri felt as if she was being judged. But for what? The woman's eyes drifted down and Zabiri started. There on the ground, 2 feet poked out from behind a tree. A woman, the same woman who Zabiri saw clearly floating just above, was passed out, tucked into a hollow in the tree trunk beneath an array of branches that held a school of new rays. Her eyes were closed, her head slumped forward, her skin was tinged purple, drool dribbling down her chin. Zabiri recalled, Goddess. She knew what she was seeing, even if she'd never seen it up so close before. She knew by the way the woman's veins swelled on her hands and how her cheeks hung slack that these were the signs of elevation. Elevation. Even the drugs that swarmed the city were laced with promises of up high living. It made Zubiri's stomach churn, especially now as the woman in front of her twitched. But while elevation explained the woman's condition, it didn't explain the figure floating above her. The woman continued to stare down at her in judgment through and through. That gaze, it reminded Subiri of her father and her aunties. It reminded her. Suddenly, the figure was gone. Zabiri squinted, then closed her eyes, then opened them again. The air was clear, empty. She stepped back, crossing her arms and squeezing them tight to her body. She felt dizzy. She'd pushed herself too hard, clearly. Hallucinations were a problem with dehydration and overexertion. Her father told her so all the time. And when Zabiri looked back at her empty and when Zabiri looked back up at her empty water bottle, she knew she'd done way too much this morning. Below her, the woman groaned, and Zabiri stepped back. Part of her wanted to wake the woman up, make sure she was okay. It was what Brianna would do after all. But then she remembered her father's warning about strangers yet again. So she left, deeply uneasy as she made her way home to shower and get ready for another day at High School 104. It would have been easier to do if all she had to apologize. It would have been easier to do if all she had to worry about was class, but the woman's eyes followed her every step of the way, vicious and narrow, no matter how Zubiri tried to shake them off. By the time she reached the warm facade of 104, the morning had brightened. She entered the building and passed through the taser and e-dagger detectors, finding the campus mostly empty since it was still fairly early. She could hear the occasional sounds of lectures droning through classrooms, signs of life thanks to those who took on the extra zero period. Beyond that, there were small knots of students leaning against concrete walls or huddled around benches. She saw one kid drawing long black lines down the side of a slab of concrete with a heavy marker, his moves lazy and unhurried. She watched to see what he was writing, though she had her guesses. Judging by the sun emblem on his jacket, he ran with the divine. One of the gangs her father was always chasing away from the stores he ran security for. Barry. Zuberry jumped at the sound of her name, though as soon as Brianna appeared beside her, she relaxed. It was as instant as a hot bath, the way her friend could always make her feel better. No matter what was going on, Brianna was the salve. Girl, I've been looking for you everywhere, Brianna said, pulling her into a quick embrace. I'm exhausted and it's only morning. Zuberi laughed. Sorry, just got here. What's up? Brianna flashed a toothy grin as she took hold of Zabiri's arm, guiding her to a nearby bench to sit. I want to go check out those boys from the Divine Sons who are running track this morning, she said. Did you see their muscles? Oh, so fine, divine. Zabiri grinned and shook her head. Another day, another Brianna crush. They came in waves, almost as dependable as the dawn of a new day. It wasn't as if the love wasn't reciprocated either. Zabiri would bet currency that her best friend was one of the most crushed on kids in their grade. Even non Nubian kids flirted with Brianna, a feat that Zabiri would have declared next to impossible given the rampant prejudice Nubians faced. Of course, it wasn't hard to see why people fell for Rihanna, considering she was beauty incarnate. Where Zabiri was athletic leanness with a streamlined, subtle personal style, Rihanna was effortlessly effortlessly effortless curves wrapped in trend-setting fashion. Today, she was wearing dark blue jeans with lightning bolt rips on the thighs, paired with a neon pink kente tee knotted just above her hip to show off a sliver of skin. Brianna had a warmth that shone through all over, from the way she spoke with her hands to the gleam in her brown eyes, often accentuated with a rainbow of colors that Zubiri knew she could have never pulled off. Today, Brianna had lined her eyes in silver and gold, a perfect counterpart to her navy and magenta braids, which were swept up into a side bun. With her braids up, Zubiri could see the thin plate earring that Brianna always wore. Barry, you listening to me? Zubiri blinked. No, she hadn't been listening. Like so many of her peers, Zubiri had been briefly wrapped up in taking Brianna in. You'd think multiple years of friendship would have dulled the effect, but Brianna still struck anyone she met into a brief and embarrassing stupor. Zubiri felt a bit better when she saw a boy across the way literally trip over his feet to look at Brianna before running into a wall. Sorry, Zubiri said, shaking her head with a laugh as Brianna looked over her shoulder at the boy. I was just checking out your eyeliner. Oh, it's perfect today, right? Brianna said, tapping the side of her right eye. You wouldn't believe how long I spent on it. Anyway, the hot divine. Hang on, Zubiri said, raising her hand. Didn't you just start dating that girl from Kim? Brianna scowled. Right, Samantha. She got crazy possessive, so I broke it off last night. I was going to text you, but it was late. You broke it off? Bri, you've been talking about that chick nonstop for days. I mean, Sammy this, Sammy that. And it was going well and fine until she started interrogating me about where I'd been and who I'd been hanging with, out with after the second date, and asking me why I wasn't answering her messages right away. Brianna made a dismissive gesture with her fingers. No, unacceptable. That's just a controlling relationship waiting to happen. And you know my freedom is too important to be dealing with possessiveness. Zabiri rolled her eyes. Goddess, give me strength. All right, okay, continue. Thank you, Rihanna said. Anyway, I've got my eye on this one divine guy, Zaire. Really big and hunky and juicy. I need you to do some recon for me. He seems like the strong, silent type, but in case he's actually. Girl, you're saying you'll break up with someone for being too possessive, but a full blown divine kid is okay? Zabiri scoffed, shaking her head again. He's literally in a gang, as in hurts people on a regular basis. Brianna dug through her scholar pack, waving her free hand absently at Zabiri. He's just misunderstood, Brianna said. Trust me. We have some classes together, and he seems so sweet and sensitive. And besides, not all of the divine are savage. Like I said, if you do the recon, which involves what exactly? Well, since you're also the strong silent type, you'll be able to tell if he's a good guy. Zabiri snorted. That literally makes no sense. Brianna extracted a notebook, one she decorated with a variety of sparkling stickers, and began flipping through the pages. It makes perfect sense. Maybe you could invite him for one of your morning workouts. The mention of the workout sent a shiver up Zabiri's spine, and she worried her lip. Brianna looked up at her and raised an eyebrow. What? Brianna asked, pausing her notebook flipping. Something happened this morning? Zabiri shrugged. She didn't like to hide things from Brianna, mostly because Brianna could be counted on to dig and dig until she unearthed whatever it was that Zabiri was trying to keep a secret, like when Zabiri had stumbled over to her house on that horrible night. She turned away from the memory, trying to force her mind to stay on the current problem. Unfortunately, that meant focusing on what she just experienced in the park. Had she really seen a spirit? Zabiri caught her best friend's worried gaze. She knew Brianna would want to know every detail of what she saw and help her work through it. After all, Brianna fancied herself an amateur therapist, and she wasn't half bad. Still, even if Zabiri wanted to be honest with her friend, what could she say? Nothing, Zabiri said. Just got kind of spooked while I was working out, I guess. Felt a little woozy. Probably didn't drink enough water. Brianna's face relaxed. I'm always telling you that you don't hydrate enough. Zabiri smiled and tapped her friend on the shoulder. Sage advice. Brianna hooked her free arm through Zabiri's and dragged them both to their feet. Come on, Brianna said, leading the two of them toward the opposite side of the school where more students were starting to filter in. If we hurry, I bet we can catch the end of the practice. Oh, and you can quiz me for history. She passed the notebook to Zabiri, opened and flipped to where she'd written her notes. Ugh, Zabiri said, looking at the pages. I forgot. It's an essay test, too, right? Yep, Brianna said with a sigh. And completely unnecessary. I don't care what a bunch of dead guys did a billion years ago. They could be teaching us something interesting, like how we should take care of our bodies and relate to each other. But no, it's always got to be why this old dead guy hated the other dead guy. And oh, guess what? They helped Jack of the World and then they died. Zabiri bit her lip. It was one of the things she and Rihanna would never agree on, no matter what. Rihanna was smart, one of the smartest kids in their grade, but there were subjects she cared about psychology, chem, and lit, for example, and subjects she loathed. History fell into the latter category. She claimed it was because she liked to focus on the present, but for Zabiri, you couldn't appreciate the present without also knowing the past. It wasn't like Zabiri was in love with their history class, especially since their preceptors always gave them the same rehashed versions of tri state East events the climate catastrophes, the building of the first seawall in New York, the creation of the Sky City, and so on. Lessons were always taught with the air that the creation of Up High had saved so many and created a new age where everyone had the chance to succeed. Nubians, the people who had come to this city after their own land was destroyed, were completely forgotten. Still, learning history was important to Zabiri, even if she got a watered down version. At least she could fill in the holes, uncovering what people were hiding about the system, and she could uncover the lies told by folks like Crazen St. John. It was the kind of thing that could get Zabiri ranting for hours. How Crazy St. John's promise of a better life up high was a big piece of the problem. Something for the lower city residents, particularly Nubian refugees, to chase after so they never stopped to realize that it was because of the up high that they suffered. How many funds went up high rather than to the lower city where they were needed? Why did up high residents always get the best tech, the best medical attention, the best everything, while those in the lower city dealt with crumbling roads and decrepit buildings and streets crawling with St. John's soldiers? Barry, you're doing it again. She blinked. Brianna had nearly marched them all the way to the field, though they were currently walking through the trailers that held foreign language classes on the outskirts of the school. The area was mostly deserted, save for a few groups of kids. The area was mostly deserted, save for a few groups of kids huddled together along the edges of campus. Behind them, covered in thick grime, was a once yellow HS 104 Create Star sign that had been defaced numerous times. It was a fairly depressing part of 104, and that was saying something. Sorry, Zabiri said. What do you say? Going into your own world again, Brianna replied with a huff, ignoring my pressing test needs. Don't worry, though, we're almost there. Right, Zabiri said, trying to stay present. You want it? A rock zipped past Zabiri's face, so close that she felt a rush of wind on her cheek. She whipped toward the source to find a tall, lanky boy leaning against one of the concrete pillars, his lips curled into a cruel smile. His friends behind him smirked and sneered. Zubiri's eyes swept over them, from the snaking tattoo on one of their necks to the web insignias scrawled on the sides of their jackets, all part of a gang dubbing themselves the Spiders. In Zubiri's last 2 years at 104, she'd watched as gangs slowly became more ubiquitous. It had started with small, let me say that again. It had started with small interactions in the hallway, the way different crews glared at each other, and had moved on to an uptick in tagging chairs, walls, toilets, anywhere that could be reached, really. Then, of course, there were the fights. With each mix up, the gangs got a little bolder. It was one of the reasons why Zabiri fully intended to tell Rihanna, no matter how nice Zaire seemed, that gang members were off limits. Case in point, the spider asshole now staring Zabiri down. He was thin with yellowing teeth, no doubt the result of whatever form of elevation he was taking. She glared at him, wishing he would evaporate on the spot. Hello, ladies, the skinny boy said, picking up another rock. Don't y'all look good? Zabiri fought to keep her fist unclenched. She moved to keep walking, but before she could, two boys she hadn't seen stepped in front of her and Rihanna. Immediately, her breathing spiked. It won't be like last time, she told herself. Calm down. Next to her, Rihanna laughed, a high tinkling sound. Throwing rocks to get our attention, Rihanna teased. Are we in second grade? The skinny boy kicked out from where he was leaning, striding toward them, nearly closing them in. Oh, believe me, he growled. We're far from that. Brianna still smiled, both hands tightly gripping the straps of her scholar pack. Good. Then you'll let us get to class. You weren't going to class, said the boy. You were going to watch those divine losers. But don't worry, we'll forgive you. Zubiri glanced at Rihanna, seeing her friend's smile falter ever so slightly. How about you back up, you skanky zombie? Zubiri said, eyes cutting to the boy again as she stepped forward, forcing him to take a step back. His head lurched toward her, a look of disbelief on his face. What do you say to me? You heard me, Zubiri said, realizing that she knew this fool's name from hearing other spiders shout him out on campus. Back up, Cal. We don't want to talk to you. He sidestepped her, moving in on Rihanna. No problem. We'll talk to your friend. Cal's eyes traveled down the girl's body, lingering on her chest and thighs, before he raised his eyebrows gleefully at his friends. They snorted with laughter as panic gathered in Rihanna's eyes. We're leaving, Zubiri said, grabbing her friend's hand. It was shaking. You're running again, Zubiri scolded herself. You can take every one of those guys, so why are you running? But now wasn't the time, not with Brianna by her side. Even if she could take them, it wasn't worth getting her best friend hurt. It didn't help either that when she looked at the boy's eyes, she saw the woman from earlier, strung out, alone, and still the look of judgment. Come on, Zabiri said, her voice barely a whisper. Let's go. Brianna nodded. She didn't question why Zabiri steered them away from the spiders and the divine on the track field, moving them straight to class. But Zabiri still felt the look of the spiders on her back. She knew that she'd just become a target. She didn't mind. Let them try. Next time, she'd show them exactly who they were messing with. Well, that is our selection from today from Nubia, The Awakening. We've read a portion of, we've read the prologue and we've read chapter one. And so we are excited about today's selection. It is Nubia, The Awakening by none other than Omar Epps and Clarence A. Haynes. And it is our paranormal selection. And so, honestly, I went back and forth between two selections for today, and well, kind of went through three. So as I told you before, there were two. So the first one I was reading, um, um, I chose the second one. So, and perhaps we'll come back and read. We'll definitely read the third choice as well. And it's not the third choice because it wasn't, it's it's just that I had choices. And so um we have chosen Nubia the Awakening by Omar Epps and Clarence A. Haynes today for day 26 Paranormal. We want to remind you that here at the International Great Black Read Aloud, we are reading aloud every day. Most days that we can get to it. It was so busy last week over the weekend for the festival and everything surrounding the festival. That we did not have time to stream live to you. And so we want to remind you what we are doing and we want you to read with us. And that is, you can read aloud with us. We invite you to pick a work by an author of African descent. Identify the author, identify yourself, read for at least 5 to 7 minutes. Don't forget to tag your reading, your video, with the International Great Black Read Aloud Day or TIG Brad, and tag your family and friends as well. Well, we are nearing the official end of the International Great Black Read Aloud Day 2024. However, we have some makeup days. And so tomorrow will be our poetry day. And we have a wonderful selection for you tomorrow. And we will see you tomorrow for poetry day. And we'll be working on making sure we do our other recordings that we need to do for our other selections, which we already have. We have those. Those are already ready to go. We just need to record. And so we will see you tomorrow here at the International Great Black Read Aloud Day 2024, where we are giving words to words written by Black people all around the world, bringing awareness to the vast and diverse world of literature by Black people. We will see you tomorrow and have a good day, have a good night, a good morning. We'll see you tomorrow night. Bye bye.